Hey guys, it's David, and I've got an oil leak issue on this Onan generator on this 2017 Thor Axis 25.3. And I'm sharing this problem with you because you know that whenever there are any issues that I have on the road, I always want to share it with you guys so that if you come across this problem yourself, then you know how to fix it. And I noticed the problem one day when going to check the oil. I noticed that there was a lot of oil buildup around the valve cover, and when I actually checked the oil, I noticed that it was almost completely out of oil. This thing was almost completely dry. And so it's a significant oil leak that needs to be addressed immediately. And if you've got a similar problem, you'll want to stay tuned because I think the problem is actually worse than just a faulty valve cover gasket. But my name's David, this is Fate Unbound, and if you like RV DIYs, RV upgrades, and travel videos, then subscribe if you haven't already, because that's what this channel is all about. But before we get into this job, I really quickly have an announcement for my patrons on Patreon, and that is I've got a giveaway item for you guys, and it is the Halo View BT11 backup camera system valued at $440. The BT11 isn't just a backup camera, it's an observational camera that can record 1080p video from the rear view mirror dash cam as well as the backup camera. It also has blind spot monitoring that gives audio and visual warnings, and it's equipped with pre-installed GPS and detects sudden collisions, automatically locking the current recorded video file. And to reduce driving risks in inclement weather, it has enhanced visibility in rainy and low light conditions with automatic brightening effects to allow objects to be seen clearly. And so if you want a chance to win this dash cam and backup camera system, go ahead and check out my Patreon page. I'll post links to that in the description below as well as to this camera system, and I'll be announcing a winner in 2 weeks. Dash cams and backup cameras are really important for RVers and travelers in general because it just gives you the security of knowing if you get into a crash, you have that information recorded. And also the backup camera obviously is important for people like me that are towing a trailer. So when I put it in reverse, I can see behind me. Now let's get back to the project. Now I referenced a couple of manuals in preparation for this job. One is a maintenance manual that really has all the information you would need for any job on one of these Onan generators. And then another is a part number manual so that you can order the exact part number for things like gaskets or other parts that you may need to replace on your Onan generator. The one that we're working on today specifically is a Cummins Onan RVQG 4000. All right, first things first, we just want to take this cover off so we can access the engine, and that's easy enough. We just turn these two knobs and just lift it out of there. And we can see our valve cover is right here. You can see a little bit of oil down here. Some is still leaked down onto here. There was a lot more, but we've since cleaned it up, but it was a lot worse than this. Now, before I take the valve cover off, I'm gonna just clean up some of this loose dirt and grime around the edge of it so that when I do take the valve cover off, hopefully it minimizes any of this dirt and grime that might fall into the engine here. And then using a pair of channel locks, I'm going to just remove this breather hose for the crankcase ventilation system. And then using an 8mm socket, we can go ahead and remove the 7 bolts that mount the valve cover to the engine. And now we can remove the valve cover. Hopefully this is going to break free pretty easily. If it doesn't, try to avoid using a screwdriver or some other tool like that to pry it off against any of the gasket mating surfaces, because if you mar those surfaces up, then that could be a source of oil leaks in the future. If you have a dead blow hammer, you can kind of lightly tap around the sides of the valve cover. Don't use a regular hammer, a metal hammer, because you could crack this. This appears to be just made out of cast aluminum, so it's going to be really brittle. So use like a rubber mallet to lightly tap, or a dead blow hammer. So this valve cover gasket was really stuck on there, and hitting it with rubber tools was not working to break it loose, but thankfully I was able to find a good pry spot right above this bolt. There is actually a place where some metal goes up that's not a part of the gasket mating surface, just above this bolt. And I was able to take this mini pry bar and get it up in there so that I could pry, slowly adding pressure until this finally broke loose. And then we can pull this valve cover and gasket off. And most likely the gasket is going to break or leave behind some residue that we can remove with a plastic scraper. Maybe take a shop rag soaked with parts cleaner to rub into this gasket material that's left behind, hopefully loosen that up a little bit, and then we'll scrape it off. And before you start scraping, if you're worried about some of this gasket material falling into the engine, you can just sort of stuff a shop rag up in there to catch any of that might fall in. Now I'm finding for these smaller bits, just wiping it with a rag soaked in parts cleaner is doing a pretty good job of getting rid of these smaller specks. But I've got some tougher sections on here that it's not really touching, and I'm gonna go ahead and take a razor blade to that. It's a little more risky, but it's kind of the only way to get tougher, thicker sections of that gasket material off. And so when you're using a razor blade to take stuff like this off, you need to be really careful, because the razor blade is a lot stronger, a lot tougher than the aluminum on this gasket surface, and so you want to be sure to hold it as flat as you possibly can and just run it across, being extra careful not to dig into the aluminum. If you hold that razor blade completely flat, that shouldn't happen. And removing all this gasket material left behind is by far the most time-consuming part of this whole job, but it's really important that you get all that off and get these gasket surfaces nice and clean. So here's the gasket mating surface of the valve cover. Pretty happy with how clean that is. I also took plenty of time cleaning out the inside to make sure that none of that gasket material was left behind inside or in any of these pockets. And I also cleaned up the outside with parts cleaner, just so that in the future, if there's another oil leak, it'll be nice and obvious, because I'm putting this back on fairly clean. And now that everything is cleaned up on these mating surfaces, both on the engine and the valve cover, we can go ahead and talk about what the other problem may be, aside from just a bad valve cover gasket that may be causing an oil leak in your engine out of the valve cover. So we removed this piece earlier that just sits right up in here. And what this is the valve breather. And what it does is it allows excess pressure inside of your crankcase to be vented out through the valve cover breather tube that we removed earlier. It's right here, that goes up into the, attaches to the valve cover. And through that tube, it just goes back to the carburetor for that air to be recycled back into the engine. And so if this breather is sticking, then it's not going to allow excess pressure inside of the engine to vent out, and that pressure's got to go somewhere. And sometimes it might begin to just force oil out of the valve cover. And honestly, I think that's the problem that we are experiencing on this engine. Now, you can just buy a new breather, but these are really simple. There's really nothing to them. It's just a little reed valve. This different colored piece of metal right here will just flap open and allow pressure to flow through it. And I'll go ahead and remove this wire mesh that's right behind it to show you how this works. So you see these two holes here. That's where the pressurized air will come through, and it will push on this reed valve from the backside. It'll open it up, and then that air will flow out through the top of the valve cover, through the valve cover breather tube, and then into the carburetor. So yeah, if this is sticking, or if this wire mesh is completely clogged, I suppose, then that pressurized air can't go anywhere, and it'll just build and build and build inside of the engine. So I'm gonna go ahead and soak both of these in parts cleaner just to get them cleaned up, and hopefully that solves that issue. So here's that parts cleaner. I've been letting the valve and this mesh soak in for a little while, and I don't know if it's showing on the camera, but I can definitely see there are some chunks inside of here. And so I'm hoping this was able to knock loose any chunks that were in that mesh, or maybe even in that breather valve. And now it's time for reassembly. I've let this wire mesh sit out so it can dry. And so we can just push that back in. Then we can put our breather valve back in place, and the valve cover gasket over that to sort of hold it in. Then we can place our valve cover on. And start putting our bolts back in. And now we just torque these bolts down. The torque spec on this QG4000 is 5 foot-pounds and then 8 foot-pounds, which comes out to 60 inch-pounds and then 96 inch-pounds, because I have an inch-pound torque wrench. And Onan has made it nice and easy for us. There's no guesswork on the pattern you need to go in to tighten these bolts. They've got it right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So go in that order first at 5 foot-pounds or 60 inch-pounds. All right, that was 60 inch-pounds. I'm gonna set the torque wrench to 96 and do it again. And again, the torque specs on your bolts might be different. These were the torque specs for an RV QG4000. Now we just need to put on the breather hose. And then get the cover on, and we're all finished. But that's all for this video and this project. I really hope that it was helpful. If you're having similar issues like this, again, I'm gonna go ahead and drop links in the video description below to part numbers for the valve gasket, the valve breather for this specific generator, but I'm also gonna be dropping links to the two maintenance manuals that I used to help prepare for this project, so that you can find part numbers and information if you have a different generator. There are a lot of different generator types, different sizes for these Onans in those two manuals, but I know it's not all of the generators that exist, so if yours isn't in there, I'm sorry, but that information's out there on the internet somewhere. But if you found this video helpful, or if you want to find, or if you'd like to see more RV generator maintenance videos from me, then go ahead and let me know down in the comments, and I'm sure we can find some other things. This generators need a lot of maintenance, and so there'll always be some kind of video that can be made on that to help you guys out. But yeah, we're finished here. We've been waiting for this to be done so that we can fire it up, because it is over 90 degrees here today in Arizona. We've been dying for some AC. So hey, Ro, go ahead and fire it up.